They say the fog in Marrow Creek isn't weather but memory, that it gathers each Halloween to help the lost find their way home. The kids repeat the rest of the legend like a dare. If you see a man walking with a lantern after midnight, don't follow the light, because it isn't lighting your path so much as measuring it. Evan never liked being told what not to do. He turned 17 the same week the town nailed plywood over the old cannery and chained the Riverfoot Bridge. Safer, the sheriff said. Evan heard smaller. He wanted one big story before he aged into the quiet of the town. So on Halloween night he left the party early, stepped into the whispering mist, and headed for the creek where the fog grew thick as breath against a mirror. At first, there was only the slow drip of water, the hushed rub of reeds against the bank. Then came the light, faint as a distant porch lamp, then brighter, swelling to the steady pulse of a heartbeat. The man holding the lantern stood on the path ahead, back turned, shoulders narrow within a long, dark coat. The lantern didn't flicker. It poured light as if it were full of milk. Evan thought of all the stories, then stepped forward anyway. The man walked. He didn't look back or slow down, only kept the lantern high, gliding over roots and stones as if the earth made space for him. Evan followed, first curious, then stubborn when the path veered away from the creek he knew. The fog thickened, ropes of it coiling around his knees, whispering the size of words that almost were. The light seemed to draw him on. Every time he fell a little behind, the lantern brightened, sweet as invitation. They passed a low branch where something dangled. Evan reached up and his fingers brushed smooth glass. A jar, he realized, hung by twine from a knot in the branch. The glass was cloudy with age, but something inside gleamed wetly. He lowered the lantern man's path with his eyes. Jars everywhere, hung like ornaments. Some were empty, some were not. The trail narrowed to a tunnel of willow. The man stepped through. Evan paused. The jars clicked faintly in the breeze like teeth. He told himself none of this was real in the way dangerous things are real. It was Halloween, and the town loved a good scare. He ducked into the willow, and his jacket drank the dew like cold hands. Beyond the willow, the earth lifted to a shelf of rock. The lantern man stopped at the edge and set the light down. He stood very straight, as if he had been carved, and at last turned his face. It wasn't a face. It was a smooth place where a face ought to be, a too-white absence, not blank so much as erased. A whisper drifted from the lantern, not sound, but a memory of sound. You came. Evan's mouth went dry. He stepped back, heel finding air. The drop wasn't far, 10 feet maybe, but the creek below churned with fog and something that glimmered like fish but wasn't. He steadied himself and looked for the man again, but the figure was close now, so close that the lantern's milk light painted the front of Evan's jacket. He smelled paraffin and cold river stone and the green, sweet rot of leaves. "Okay," Evan said, because fear made him stupid, and bravado came cheaper than panic. "You got me. You're incredible. Who are you?" The light answered, not the man. The jars clinked again, and he realized the gleam within them were not fish scales or bottle caps or coins thrown toward wishes. They were eyes, dozens of them, hundreds. Some clouded with age, some shockingly clear, all fixed not on the man but on the lantern, as if worshipping their small son. Evan turned to run and found that running here was like trying to sprint underwater. The fog pressed in, firm as a body. His breath wheezed loud in his own ears, the sound of a trapped animal. The man moved beside him without moving at all, his coat brushing Evan's sleeve, his shoulder weightless and near. The lantern swung in a slow arc, lighting a path that did not exist until the light described it. He burst from the willow tunnel into a clearing he didn't recognize. Old trees leaned around it like listeners. Something wooden stood at the center. Gallows, his mind supplied, then corrected to a frame for hanging meat or drying nets. The sort of useful horror that small towns build and then pretend is something else. Rope dangled, knotted into loops that remembered necks. On each post, a hook. The lantern man set the light upon one of the hooks, and the clearing changed. The fog retreated in a ring, as if the light were a heat it could not bear. In the sudden clarity, Evan saw the names carved into the frame. Years, dates, initials, the graffiti of fear. Some of the years were old as the cannery, some were last year. One was tonight's date, already cut so clean the wood curled white around it like a peeled apple. "I'm leaving," Evan said, to no one that had a face. "I'm leaving." "You can," said the light. It sounded like his mother saying it's okay, like his father saying be smart, like his own voice telling himself not to cry when he was 6 and the creek took his shoe. "You can leave if you can find the path that is yours." Paths appeared at the clearing's edge, dozens of them, each a dark throat into the trees. One led back toward the willow tunnel. One smelled like smoke. One had frost rimming its leaves. He chose the one that seemed right by the lean of the land and the feel of the dirt under his shoes, the same instincts that bring people home from long walks. He walked. The path bent and seemed to listen. He walked longer. The fog grew thinner. He began to hear distant music. The party at Jenna's house, he thought, loud and bright and ordinary. Relief made him bold. He pulled out his phone to text, "I found the lantern man," but the screen showed the camera without being told, and the camera showed the clearing again, the frame, the lantern on its hook, the nameless man near it, and Evan standing in the center with his phone up to his own face. The image lagged by a second, then 2, then 3, and when it caught up, the Evan in the phone turned his head toward him and shook it gently. No. The path narrowed to a slit. Trees leaned in. The music turned into a distant siren, then into wind. He pushed forward, shoulder-scraping bark, and came out into a second clearing that looked like the first except for one detail. A single jar hung from the frame, clear and new and empty, bouncing idly as if someone had just let it go. The lantern man arrived without arriving. The light was near his hand again. "You can leave," the light said, and its milk pail brightened until Evan's shadow grew long enough to wrap his feet. "But something must stay to find your way back." "What?" he said, and hated the child sound of it. The lantern lifted. The jar stopped bouncing. All around the clearing, the fog leaned forward, hungry to hear his answer. He thought of the town and the cannery and the chain across the bridge and how badly he wanted a story that wasn't a story someone else had told him first. He thought of the eyes in the jars, all looking, all waiting for the lantern to rise. "Okay," he said, and the word plumed in the cold air. "Okay, take a," he almost said picture, and maybe he did, because the camera on his phone flashed without his thumb. A small warmth rushed out of him, not a pain, but a surrender. The lantern brightened. Something inside the empty jar fluttered once like a moth at a bulb, and then settled. The path home appeared so easily afterward that he laughed. He walked it without thinking. The fog peeled away. The bridge reappeared, the chain slack on the ground as if someone had stepped on it when they passed. He crossed and climbed the hill. Jenna's porch was full of kids in makeshift capes and fake blood, everyone loud with sugar and relief. They cheered when he walked up. "Where'd you go, man?" someone asked, grinning. "You ghosted." Evan started to answer, then found his voice was late, as if someone else had to give it permission to arrive. His throat worked. The word came out flat. "Fog," he said, and shrugged. He stayed late, then later, because the house felt safe under the careful lights of other people. When he finally left, the town below lay quiet. He checked his phone as he walked. Battery fine, time just past 3, camera app open again without him asking. He lifted it to his face, and the screen showed him smiling, a second behind, eyes a shade too bright, as if reflecting a light not present. The lens glinted. When he lowered the phone, the night seemed to breathe. Far down in the creek, something knocked glass against wood, once, twice, measuring. In the morning, fishermen found a jar caught in reeds by the bridge. Inside, not an eye, Not anything human, just a small circle of condensed breath, a ring where someone had fogged the glass from within. The jar disappeared by afternoon. No one took it. The river simply lost it like it loses shoes. Evan didn't talk about the Lantern Man again. He didn't need to. When the fog returned the next Halloween and the light moved along the path, he knew which way to look. He knew which way was his. And in the right kind of dark, when his phone caught his reflection off a window, he could see the faintest pale glow somewhere behind his eyes, like a lantern asking a familiar question. Will you follow?